Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see you. My name is Krista Bradley. I'm Director of Programs and Resources at APAP. You are in the legislative briefing, and this is an opportunity to hear from colleagues that we get a chance to work with regularly around advocacy issues that impact our sector. And we have an opportunity just to hear what's happening right now, what's coming down the pike, given that this is an election year, and how you can be active and engaged in the work that impacts you and your work and our livelihoods. I am so happy to introduce our moderator and our colleague who we work with very closely with the Cultural Advocacy Group, Heather Noonan from the League of American Orchestras, to moderate today and also to introduce the rest of the panel or ask the panel to introduce themselves. And so you'll hear a little bit and then you'll have an opportunity to ask a number of questions. So Heather.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I want to thank APAP for giving me a reason to leave Washington, D.C. It's always nice to get outside the Beltway. But you've already heard one of the reasons that we want to stay alert here is, as Krista mentioned, it is an election year. So elected officials are very tuned in to what the people who elect them have to say. It also can be a bit disruptive on the policy front. How and when policies get made are a little unpredictable. But we want to really focus today on where the opportunities are, and there are a lot of them, for advocates to be engaged on issues that will have a direct impact on the performing arts sector. So I'm Heather Noonan. I'm with the League of American Orchestras, and we're the National Association for Orchestras all over the country. We're also a close collaborator in policy advocacy with APAP and a full range of national arts organizations, humanities organizations, entertainment organizations. And one of the themes I think you'll hear as we discuss these policy issues today is how important it is that we work collectively and provide unified messages in advancing the arts sector so that we have the biggest possible impact on the policies ahead of us. So I'm going to just ask each of our speakers to introduce themselves quickly. We're going to focus on two key policy areas because they are really front burner right now. But at the end, we'll come back to a short discussion of a fuller array of issues that are also cooking on the policy front. And the two key issues are going to center on ticketing policies and the artist visa process. So with that, I'll hand it off for a quick introduction.
Thanks, Heather, and thanks, APAP, for giving us a chance to talk about these things. My name is Matthew Covey. I'm the Executive Director of Tamizdat, which is a nonprofit based here in New York that works on artist advocacy and research, legal research regarding artist mobility issues, meaning visa issues, especially here in regards to getting artists into the U.S.
Hey, y'all. My name is Andre Perry. I work on the performing arts team at the University of Iowa. I also serve on the NEVA board, currently the board chair, and so working really closely with a lot of our partners here.
Hi, I'm Nathaniel Marro. I am the managing director of NITO, the National Independent Talent Organization. We represent agents and managers who primarily represent musicians. NITO, along with NEVA, advocated heavily on behalf for SVOG, which obviously a lot of people in this room probably benefited from.
Thank you. So I know, Andre, you have a limited amount of time before you have to skip off to other business. So I think we'll start with hearing from NEVA. But first off, just a quick landscape setting maybe on ticketing policy and also on the visa policy is that very many policy issues will have action underway in different settings and all at the same time. So when it comes to ticketing issues, we have action underway in the U.S. Congress. It takes a while sometimes for a bill to become a law, right? So these things can move rather unpredictably. So we've got congressional action. We've also got an open moment where the Federal Trade Commission, under the current administration, is making new rules specifically related to ticketing. That can happen on a definite time frame. So this administration doesn't have to wait for a bill to become a law to make new rules in this space, and they're proposing some right now. And then the third area of activity on ticketing is related to what's going on in your state. So you've got the federal policy scene, but you've also got independent states setting up new approaches to ticketing policy as well. And you'll see that at least when it comes to what's going on in Congress and what's going on in agencies, the immigration issue has a similar kind of two-way thing going also. So we'll just start with the ticketing issue, and if you wanted to kind of frame up where NEVA has been in that space.
Of course, thank you. A brief apology. I'm sorry, I do have to run to another meeting. I'm grateful for everyone's attendance. If there's something that you want to know from the NEVA front, please reach out to me post this if we're not able to cover the question at this panel today. So in very, I think, like basic terms, if we look at the landscape, as Nathaniel mentioned, there was a pretty big coalition that came together to push through the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, which seemed like a very big step for the way in which we as a field, all the different diverse parts of our field, engage with our federal government. And through that, it has, I think in some ways, opened the door for us to be in conversation about other issues that are absolutely crucial to the field. And the one of them on the federal level right now is a coalition that's been put together that is called Fix the Ticks. If there's anything else that I ask you to remember from the ticketing side of today's talk, it's remember Fix the Ticks. Look that up. You can see the full details of who's in the coalition, what the points are, what the status of the Fix the Ticks effort is, and get more information if something slips away after this meeting. But here are the core pieces of the legislation, of the two pieces of legislation that are trying to move through both the House and the Senate levels. There are three core areas. One is about eliminating deceptive marketing practices in the market. So when resellers are duplicating or trying to represent a venue or a promoter and how they sell their tickets, and to try to convince people that, hey, this is an alternative place, and representing to be that promoter or that venue who is putting out the tickets into the market. So getting rid of that practice. Also having all-in pricing, so there's absolute transparency on all sides of a deal, particularly for customers, about what you're paying for and how much it costs when you go in to purchase a ticket for a small, medium, or large event. And then the last piece that is a big focus is eliminating the practice of speculative ticketing, where resellers or scalpers are basically running a futures market on tickets and selling tickets to shows that they currently do not possess. All of this, we hope, will bring greater transparency for everyone involved, between the people behind the scenes, the promoters, the artists, the managers, the agents, and putting deals together, and to have transparency for the market of customers who really support these various parts of the industry, and to get closer to a fairer market for actually selling tickets to live events. And I think that is a nutshell of what's included. I think the why it's important is that there have been efforts to address ticketing issues in the industry for many, many years, and this is the first time that we've had attention at a level that is this intense and this close from our representatives across the country who are based in DC. So this is a moment. It is also a moment, as you know, because it is a really difficult time to move things through our Congress. We're just in an intense moment. As you know, in the larger scale, we're trying to figure out a budget deal. If things are able to move forward and there is to be an agreement between the House, the Senate, and get it across the president's desk, we might be able to get this legislation pushed through on the back of whatever budget deal might happen. I think that would be a dream, and that would be great. And I think another, from the anxiety side, is we are worried, I think, as a coalition, that if this moment can't happen, we're not sure when the next moment might be. There's just a lot of question marks about our political climate. And so the call to action is maybe twofold. One, look up Fix the Ticks after today on your phone or when you're at home. And there will be a time when this coalition asks you, in whatever state and community you live in, if you believe in this work, to advocate and to let your representatives know. And I'll pause there.
That was great, Andre. To dive a little bit deeper into exactly what's happening on the legislative front, and again, to repeat everything Andre said, please look up Fix the Ticks, please go to the website, and please do the call to action that's on there. There are two bills right now that are happening, one in the House, one in the Senate. The bill that was introduced in the Senate, much of the lobbying work was done on behalf of the coalition. We helped write the bill to get to where it is now. The bill in the Senate is called Fans First. It has the speculative ticketing ban. It will do all-in pricing, which also includes fees from the onset. So they're clearly marked from the face value and the fees. It'll do deceptive URLs. It'll hopefully ban those. There will be a very broad GAO study on the exact ticket marketplace that currently exists. And you would have to have more transparency in terms of disclosing that you are a reseller of tickets. Those are some broad brushstroke. And also on top of that, there's also an improvement to the Bots Act and enforcing, hopefully killing bots before they're able to buy tickets. In the House, it is the Ticket Act. This originally started in the Senate, and then it went down to the House. It was originally just an all-in pricing ticket, and then through our efforts, we were able to get a spec ban added. We were able to get deceptive URLs. Some refund policies also added to that as well. Again, on fixthetix.com, there's all of these explainers. There's all the information you need to know on this, and there will be a call to action. So everyone knows how we got where we are and a broader picture of the landscape. The secondary markets, StubHub, Vivid Seats, SeatGeeks of the world, they've been at this for about 10 years now. They have had a very good head start. They are also very well financed and well funded. They have been influencing the consumer groups to basically say that the secondary market is good for consumers. They have been very successful at doing that. We have been battling with them for about 8 months, 9 months, maybe more, going back and forth. Many on the legislative side want consumer groups to sign off on things, so the original bill that we had that would have been very powerful and very strong has been whittled down to where it is now. We still have 2 very, very good bills that will definitely affect change. However, we are up against some very large juggernauts who are really pushing members around in DC to do things that are surprisingly not very consumer friendly, but they're being played off as consumer-friendly groups. NITO itself, we did a study. We saw that, of the shows that we studied, tickets that were sold in the secondary market were over 2 times more expensive than they were on the primary market. We saw about, of the 70-ish shows that we looked at, there's about 500 tickets resold on the secondary market per show. We saw the average profit that was being made by resellers was about $41,000. Exactly. This is what we're facing up against, and everyone in this room knows that has a fan base or has members or anything like that. They know that they want their members or their fans to pay the price that was set. They don't want people to buy tickets on the secondary market. The issues that we're talking about here, just to get a better sense, if you go search right now, my favorite artist at this venue, the first 4 things that are going to pop up on Google are secondary sites. They pay for placement on Google searches so that they know what's happening. In terms of deceptive URLs, jonesbeach.com is a secondary ticket site. It is that kind of leverage that's happening right now across the country. And we've done studies at NITO. We've seen that there's probably over 1,000 of these fake venue sites that if you're not understanding, if you don't know where to look, it looks just like a venue site could be, and it's sending you right to a secondary market. So these fans are buying tickets that they think are real tickets, that they think are, from the venue, and they have no idea what they're doing. And that's really, really difficult to educate people on, and it's really, really difficult for us to really make a broad movement unless we can get legislation passed. We've been trying to explain this to the legislator. We've been doing a pretty good job, I think. They get this side of the story. It is definitely a problem, though, that the secondaries have this much power right now in Washington. So it's important that everyone here, if this is an issue that matters to you, you write to your elected officials, you give them stories, you send them stories. They listen when it's local. That's always the case. And so it's very, very important that you get involved. A few other things that I just wanted to mention. There's a lot of state policies that are also going to be written over the next couple of years. Right now we are in New York City. It is a right to transfer state, which means that you cannot put in any legislation or you cannot do anything that blocks the ability for someone to transfer a ticket. When NITO looked into specific shows, we saw a show for a very popular arena act in the state of California, which allows people to block transfer. For 2 arena shows in LA, there was 26 tickets sold on the secondary market. For 1 show at Madison Square Garden, there was about 1,500 tickets sold in the secondary market. So that's the difference between right to transfer states and non-right to transfer states. There are rules that can be effective in blocking these things, but right now, the same people that are going at us in Washington are going state by state by state, and they're all well funded. So it's important to pay attention what's happening in your local state, because the reality is these state legislators are even more easy to influence on the bad side, but even easier to get, a good story and have them understand the picture. People part of this coalition helped stop bills in Florida last year, helped stop bills in Georgia last year, helped stop bills in Washington last year. We're working on helping, get good bills passed in California to keep the way it is right now. So these issues are going to keep on coming up, and they're going to keep on coming up. So it's really important that you stay focused and stay tuned into what's happening. We're going to do our best as a member of the coalition to keep people informed and as up to date as possible, but it's really a collective effort here. We're battling some people that make a lot of money from this practice, and we're trying to stop it. So I hope that wasn't too bleak, but it's important that people get a sense of what's going on.
I think probably everyone in this room could have a story to tell, a personal story to tell about how this has impacted them. Maybe it's because the bottom line of your artistic engagement is suffering because the resources aren't going to the venues and the primary sellers, but to another part of the market. It also really erodes consumer confidence in these arts engagements, right? And so if you've been involved with a venue where you've got customers who show up with a fake ticket or realize on site that they've basically been defrauded, it destroys their entertainment experience, right? So you have these stories to tell, and artists certainly have a story to tell around this. And I'm also thinking, I'd love to hear, if you have just one more moment, Andre, this is kind of part of our sector's recovery story too, isn't it? So much attention was captured with elected officials during the pandemic, enough for them to support the Save Our Stages program. And this is the same community that's really suffering under this threat that is still in recovery mode. So do you think also part of the story is those same grassroots reconnecting with elected and keeping that conversation open that they were having during the pandemic?
100%. And I think Nathaniel was hitting on it. The stories from the local level are so crucial because it really illustrates, the coalition can get up there all the time and kind of like lay out all the information, the data. But when you get that letter, that email, that phone call, that's a story from, in my case, a venue in Iowa, in Des Moines, in Ames, in Iowa City, or in Decorah, where something has gone wrong, whether it's on the venue side, or you get a call from a manager in your state, or you get a call from an agent in your state, or you get a call from an artist, which is the greatest. It really does that illustration point. And I think we have to keep telling our story. And this is probably part of a larger frame where we have such a diverse industry of performance with so many different sorts of artists and mechanisms that are, and infrastructures are helping to like steward those artists to opportunities, and so many venues and promoters who are making the events happen. And I think everyone in this room and at this conference knows what's up, but there's so many other people in America who I don't think know what we're doing for communities, small, medium, and large. And I think this is part of the process of us beginning to educate how we're important parts of communities across this nation. And so to put a more positive spin on it, or to add a positive spin, there are some bleak elements to this, but we have to keep getting wins. We need to get this win, and then we need to get back together and figure out what the next win is. And I do have to go. Thank you so much.
Thanks, and also so many thanks to NEVA for their leadership on this issue as well. Yeah, it's easy to also fall into the trap of thinking that Washington doesn't listen, but I guarantee you, if ever they're listening, you're in the sweet spot right now where policy leaders are listening to the electorate. So going into this election cycle, your voice actually has more power than it ever has before as a constituent. So know how to reach out to your senators, know how to reach out to your member of the U.S. House, but also these proposals at the state level, they move so much faster than things in D.C. So if you're not yet tapped into your state network of advocates who are working on these issues, see if you can get plugged into that, find out who those folks are, and help make that kind of progress. And it's the personal stories that make all the difference. And I think the same is true on artist issues, to segue to that. And we'll come back for some questions, I think, because there might be some questions around the ticketing policy as well. But do you want to tell us what's going on that front?
I want to try.
All right, give it a shot.
I also want to acknowledge that Heather works and has worked for so long on these topics that you moderating me talking about this is a little funny. So I'd like to propose that we tag team this one, and when I forget something important, you just jump right on in
All right.
and point it out. By contrast with the Fix the Ticks project, the work that's being done, there's an enormous amount of work being done on advocating for improving the artist visa policies in this country. The thing about that is that's immigration policy, and getting immigration policy changed in the US right now is fairly thorny, to say the least. So for a long time, with the exception of one piece of legislation which has been kind of plugging its way through the halls of power for a number of years now, most of the strategies that Tamizdat and League of American Orchestras, in conjunction with a lot of the major performing arts organizations, have taken is to really look not so much as trying to get Congress to do anything, but looking more at the regulations and this that underlie those, which is basically the procedures that happen at U.S. Homeland Security, at the Department of State, and at Customs and Border Protection. So because at Tamizdat we do an annual analysis of thousands of visa cases that go wrong, and from that data we release a paper every year on what we think would be the steps that would improve the processes. And this is an incredibly long and fairly boring document that goes very deeply into the specific practices that happen in the offices and in the adjudication processes and at the consulates and at the ports of entry around the world, or embassies around the world, ports of entry around the U.S. So I don't really want to go too deeply into that because it's really in the weeds. But I do want to say that I am more hopeful now than I have been in a really, really long time about the notion of change happening. In part because for well over a year, more than 2 years, we've been working on trying to put together a meeting. And when I say we, I mean Heather at League of American Orchestras, myself, as well as an ad hoc coalition of arts organizations called the Performing Artist Visa Working Group. If you're interested in being involved or finding more about what that does, let us know. But we have been working on trying to put together a meeting that would bring together the important government players with important stakeholders in the field to actually hash through collectively some of these ideas, and also to lay the groundwork for ongoing dialogue. It was ongoing dialogue about how the process could be improved. It seemed like something of a pipe dream for a long time, but in October it actually happened, and for the first time in history, you're on a Zoom call with very important stakeholders from Homeland Security, Customs and Border Protection, State Department, folks from the National Endowment for the Arts were there as well as an important collection of really key stakeholders within the arts sector. And it was a remarkably positive conversation where the people from the government had clearly read the proposals and they had really productive comments and questions, and it felt like a dialogue, which was amazing. And since that time, there has been an ongoing conversation like I have never seen in 25 years of working in this field between government actors and stakeholders, talking about like, how do we start edging toward improving things? So just to tell you what we're talking about in terms of improving, there are a handful of topics that we've really been focusing on, and how these play out in the different departments is details, but basically we've been talking about addressing timely processing of petitions. We've been talking about addressing the standard of evidence required by visa petitions. Timely processing, for anybody who's dealt with the artist visa process, you know that the processing of these petitions when you submit to them to the government can take anywhere from a few weeks to a few months to many months. And this lack of reliability makes it very hard in the sector to to program because you don't know how long it's going to take, or you're stuck spending an enormous amount of money to expedite the process. So we're working on on a number of different ways that could be, the processing time could be made more reliable. As anybody who's done the process before knows, the evidence that you have to submit to the government in order to get an approved visa is incredibly complex and onerous, and also kind of a moving target. There's a lot of subjective stuff in there, and that the complexity of that process is what has driven most people in this room to eventually end up hiring lawyers like myself to prepare these petitions, because if you don't hire a lawyer, there's a sense that, oh my God, I don't know if it's ever going to be approved. And that process has driven a lot of the expenses. It's not just the filing fees, but for many people, it's the legal fees as well. If we can bring down the evidentiary burden, that also could bring down the costs of the process. So that's a second piece that we've been really working on. As a lot of you know who've dealt with this, there's been an enormous amount of confusion and complexity and dysfunction in the State Department at embassies around the world, and post-COVID and various wars around the world haven't helped that in making getting visas actually issued an incredibly difficult process. And this is something we've been working on and now discussing with State Department, how to make that a more reliable process. And also addressing some of the issues that we've seen, which some of it's sort of residual from the prior administration, but challenges that really raise issues of equity and fairness depending on where an artist is coming from in the world, and creating new mechanisms to try to make sure that the visa process is not one that is inequitable depending on a region that an artist is coming from. Heather, what am I missing? Go
Nothing,
for
but
it.
I'm going to add
Okay,
stuff
go.
anyway.
Add lots.
So, what does this mean for you engaging in advocacy on this issue? Because I'm going to hazard a guess, many of you have run into this problem around navigating the visa process. One is that we get to complain if we're in compliance with the rules and we tried them and they don't work. So the first step is understanding what compliance looks like. So what does it mean to make sure that you're going through all the steps you should to engage an artist? And Tamizdat has those resources to help you. We also host a website that was initiated with support from the National Endowment for the Arts called artistsfromabroad.org. And the idea is that you can gain competency, and it's advised by lawyers who specialize in this, so that you can gain competency to know how to navigate that process and the tax withholding process as well. If you encounter a problem, your association, each of us, I'm just going to volunteer, we would like to hear about it. To the degree we can document cases where the system isn't working, we have a stronger leg to stand on in two ways. One is we start to know how we can find those solutions. What's the policy change that'll make a difference? And there's a long line of people complaining to federal agencies. There's a small handful who come with solutions in their hands. And that's really where the Tamizdat white paper gave us the leverage during this meeting to have a breakthrough, right? So we weren't just saying this doesn't work for us. We're saying you can fix this today, and here's how, without passing immigration reform. Here's how you can get it done. But those efforts are only supported if we've got stories from home, examples where people tried to do the right thing and it's not working. So I'd say if you're not already plugged into this information loop, please do check it out and help us make that case. It is true that Congress is slow going on comprehensive immigration reform. In fact, the truth of this is so specific that when last time we had our little artist immigration bill introduced, it became the envelope, that bill number became the envelope for the entire comprehensive immigration reform proposal, right? So that's how tied up all this stuff is. But it's still really important that you talk to your elected officials about this problem too. If this is a story you have to tell them, keep them engaged in it. They can help in two ways. If we get a vehicle moving, and this is a non-controversial solution, it's had bipartisan support, and they've heard from you that you care about it, they're more likely to hitch it to something, and just as we were talking about with the ticketing policy, right? The other is, in some cases, they can help if you run into a problem and you need congressional intervention, but you've got to keep that line warm. And I think this is true on any policy issue that concerns you today. So I think in terms of ways that you can help us stay engaged. The other opportunity that's around the horizon, maybe we should talk about the fee increase proposal, just ever so briefly. That, as I was mentioning earlier, in addition to many ways a policy gets made, agencies set their policy and they're required to consult the public every time they make a major change in policy. So last year, the Immigration Service proposed a massive fee increase that would really, really impact the ability to bring guest artists here. And we all, collectively, 83 national arts organizations submitted comments in response to that. They then, I think it was directly related to our comments, I'm sure. They then essentially postponed implementation of the fee increase. In another couple of months, they're going to go back to that proposal again. So if this is, and we'll get some kind of indication of which direction they're heading, be on standby, be ready to help us speak up. If this is still going in the direction that is harmful to us, we need to make that clear. If they do the right thing and take a more incremental approach, we've got to speak up and acknowledge that they're making progress for us. Because that is another key, I think, to kind of this breakthrough and having more of a dialogue instead of a one-way exchange with policy leaders.
I want to make a little pitch in regards to if you have problems reaching out and making sure that your voices are heard. Obviously, if you go straight to your congressional representative to solve a problem with a visa, great. But one of the programs that both League of American Orchestras and Tamizdat run is providing pro bono assistance with visa problems that artists and arts organizations have. Part of it is because we want to help you, but part of it is how we collect information about what the problems are in the field. So if there's problems and you need help, reach out to us because we need that information and we can help you with the problems. So that's important to know. I also just want to say that if you are interested, if you have this kind of mind and are interested in the details that we're talking about, the details of the proposals that we're talking about, all of this is on Tamizdat's website. I don't know, is it on yours as well? The proposals, it's like 70 pages, lots of footnotes, but it's very easy to find under resources on the Tamizdat website. There you can see the what is referred to as the recommendations for performing artist visa policy, the current one.
And he's underselling it. It's a fascinating read, really. All 70 pages. You're going to love it. Check it out. But really, the solutions you're looking for hopefully are in that document. I'd like to take a pause in just 1 second to invite some questions you might have on either of these topics, and then I'll like to loop back to some other issues, policy issues related to creative expression. But going back to the ticketing issue, we also have another public comment period that's actually open right now. The Federal Trade Commission is inviting comments, and sometimes it's hard for us to see ourselves in the policy issues because of the wonky language they use. In this case, it's funny that the FTC blogs about stuff and they take such a colloquial, kind of breezy kind of approach to it. It kind of cracks me up. But the framing that they're using for what we would call the ticketing issue today is junk fees. So when you see conversations in the headlines about junk fees or policy proposals about junk fees, know that even though you might not think you're engaged in junk fees, this is actually about you. This is about our industry, right? So there's a rulemaking right now, and it's got some of the very top line disclosure rules around transparency on all-in pricing and being very clear about what the fees are for, and also being very clear about what is refundable in a fee. So the rule itself is actually very simple, fairly direct, and I would say most in the field are already compliant in this way. So you might say, why do we need to speak up? It sounds fine to us. In the 60 other pages surrounding that, they ask all kinds of questions about the secondary market, bots, dynamic pricing, really all the components that go around the ticketing process. And that's our cue to clue them into things they don't yet know about how our industry works. There are 51,000 comments filed so far. And just with not having glanced at all of them, I can tell you Many of them are from consumers who are really unhappy with the way things work for them when they try to buy tickets today, right? So that's actually common cause with our points. We just have to knit together for the policy leaders. Again, what's the solution to that supports artists? What's the solution to that supports arts venues, right? What's the solution that supports those consumers? So we like to think that every federal comment period is an opportunity to not necessarily just answer the questions they're asking, but to say the things we want them to hear, right? So you can find out more about that. We have a little ticket policy action center on AmericanOrchestras.org. Comments to the Federal Register don't have to be terribly technical. You should know that they're always publicly available. So whatever you say there can be seen by anyone. So be measured in what you say. But again, it's a way to tip off the agency of how do things work in the real world. And that's true with both the visa policies and also with what's going on with the commission. And they read these. In fact, when they issue the final rules, they do a summary of what they read in the public comments. So this is actually part of the process, part of the grind in DC that actually is workable. It's something that can be accessible to you.
And just to comment on that, NITO issued its first comments for this last round, and there was 12,000 other comments, but we were quoted 6 times in the report. So they actually did read our report.
So do we want to pause for a second and just see if anyone wants to, I see a microphone here, maybe you want, oh, there you go. Step up to the mic with some questions.
Hello, hi. I'm Stephen Palacio. Heather, good to see you from League of American Orchestra Days. Hello. I am now working at MKI Artists, and we are in the classical chamber music space. And my question has to do specifically with the visa process. So we have a quartet that is from France that we've come and toured to the United States on multiple occasions, but there's a member of the quartet who, for all intents and purposes, is French, right? But his country of origin is Vietnam. So every time that we do a visa process for the quartet, we run into this issue where the quartet's visa is withheld or held in that process, and there's been multiple rounds of requests for more information. In the past, we've been able to get that request for information done, and their visas have been approved. But in the most recent iteration, we're still in this holding pattern, and we're feeling that it's potential that somebody on the agency side has, at this point, been pinged this particular artist over and over again as to kind of holding every single time because his country of origin happens to be Vietnam. So I don't know if there is anything, suggestions on your end of how we can get out in front of that, especially given the fact that this quartet in particular only comes and tours one particular time of year. So it's always the same time frame, and it's always the same quartet and always the same quartet member that we have an issue with getting a visa approved for.
I'm going to answer that in 2 ways. One, that's a broad, like sort of taking from what you're saying, a broad lesson for everybody. And then I would love to speak with you afterwards about actual strategies. What you're talking about there broadly addresses what I was mentioning before, is just the incredible lack of transparency and complexity in the process. So when you're describing this fact pattern, lawyer speak, I'm thinking like, oh, I see, there's this question and there's this issue and which consulate is it and when did he immigrate? So there's a million details that I'm unpacking, which play into what's happening at the embassy, where, if there's a ping, which database system is it functioning on? So that's how I'm going to answer that question. But the problem is, more broadly for everyone, is that this kind of thing happens all the time. And the question is, how do you address that? And I think part of the frustration and part of the reason that both League of American Orchestras and Tamizdat provide these services is you can't answer that question unless it's case specific. So if you have a problem, talk to your representative or talk to us or talk to somebody who does this, because there's no way, if you're doing this once a year, there's no way that you can know how to solve that problem. Whereas if I'm, for example, handling 4,000 or 5,000 artist visa cases a year, I might be able to say, wait, which embassy was this? Oh, well, this is the problem there. It's this guy who works there who doesn't know what he's doing. So you need to contact his supervisor. This is their email address. So I think the thing about this is everybody needs to know that you can't go it alone on this topic. You need to be able to resource people and organizations that can help.
Also, we have a
And I'll talk to you later.
We have
Sorry.
a policy solution for this too, which is we're asking these agencies to recognize that these folks have come multiple times to the U.S. and shouldn't you somehow streamline the process?
Right,
to-
and they've been
to-
approved time and time again.
Right. So you've got a story to tell. Like this is a real world story about the economic impact of having to go through this cycle and these difficulties over and over again too, right? And you're doing a session tomorrow?
Tomorrow. Yeah, there's a session.
Specifically on the ABCs of the artist visa process?
That's correct. Yep.
Right.
So it's tomorrow. I don't have any idea what time it is, but I think it's in the early afternoon, I think.
Great, I'll try to
But
be
he'll
there.
be there.
I'll be
for
there.
Sure.
And I'll be there and more receptive to like case-specific questions, then it'll be easier to address them.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have an app for that.
Go
Swap.
ahead.
I'm Brenda Bushhouse. I'm from the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and I'm in the School of Public Policy, and I can't say how much I appreciate what you have just told the group, because I teach this to my students. And ever since Obama, we have regulations.gov where agencies have to post their rules for public comment, and that's where you post your comment. But the FTC didn't comply. It has its own. So you have to go to the FTC website in order to find the rules to comment on them. So I'm really appreciative that you have this information on your websites because it can get really complex. But I also encourage people to go to congress.gov and actually read the legislation. Just go there and read it. It's really, you can get every little nuance of which amendments and who's done what and which dates, and that's just really fun. But I also am going to make a shameless plug because once we have successes like Save Our Stages, we have to be able to tell their stories. And so what I'm doing right now with Tamara Kashecki is we've got a study that's trying to ask nonprofit organizations that received a Shuttered Venues Operators Grant to please let us know of your experiences so we can document that in order to inform policy. So we have these flyers that we're happy to give out, but I would just say it's really important when you had a win like that to give the feedback to the policymakers as well. So thank you for all that you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah, that is an unprecedented level of federal subsidy for the arts sector and possibly one we may not see again for a while. So it's really critical to tell the story. It's great to be able to share that data, but also if you've had the benefit of that program and you've not yet reached out to your elected official to tell them what it meant to your business, tell them what it meant to your artists, definitely do that as well. It will stick because they also don't get thanked very much. So they'll remember if you're someone who thanked them. Yes, you have a question.
Yes, thank you guys so much for the work you do. My name is Josh Avener. I work for a company called Hideaway Circus. We tour all over the US and sell tickets directly. So we have the ticketing challenge in different states, and we also do artist visas, P1Bs. You guys are talking about the two main things that interest me. Nathan, I'm wondering if you can just strongman the argument that the opponents, to these bills make, just that when we're advocating for it, I have a sense of what they're saying in contrast to what we're trying to say.
To put it bluntly, everything that they're doing right now is in the field of Ticketmaster. They're saying they're the competition to Ticketmaster. They're saying they're the answer to Ticketmaster. And since Taylor Swift's tour, a lot of people are very interested in doing something around Ticketmaster. And so ironically, I think there's a lot of things that got written out of this bill that would have actually done more to potentially harm Ticketmaster. But that's the majority of where all of this is coming from. It really is kind of hyper-focused from the opposition. I guess our opposition is what can be done to do Ticketmaster. And the reality is a lot of lawmakers don't really understand the bigger picture, and they're just hyper-focused on our kids couldn't get tickets to Taylor Swift. Why was that? This must be the reason. And so that's where all of that is coming from. And what we've been able to do well in the coalition is we have members of the coalition that are a part of another coalition called Break Up Ticketmaster. And they're saying, hey, this is legislation we need just to make the entire ticket marketplace better. And to make sure that we have, viewpoints on the coalition that are strictly saying what you're doing right now and what you're doing isn't really going to hurt Ticketmaster, and for them to know that. And so we're trying to make that point as much as possible. But that's if you want one, real place where it's all coming from, it's coming from that. And the reality is, it's just the secondary markets. It's the secondary resellers. They don't want to be legislated because they are making a very large amount of money right now in this more or less legislative free zone. So those would be the two places.
Thank you.
One bit of context too that kind of applies across arts policy issues too is you're also working in the bigger picture context of a very slim majority in the chambers in the House and Senate, and Republican offices by and large assume that business does not want to be regulated by the federal government. And there are any number of Republican offices who, at a glance at this legislation, it looks like you're putting new regulation, giving more authority to the FTC to regulate an industry, and you're putting new requirements on any number of businesses around the primary sales transparency issues. So they need to hear, those offices need to hear from businesses who are saying, no, we want this. This will be good for my business. This is a control against fraud. This is not just putting more government regulation on private business. And it's really easy for, policymakers have so many things on their desk at once, they just come to assumptions about things. You are their extended staff on this issue. You're the expert on how this connects to your business, right? So we always just have to spell it out for them. Why is it good for you? Yeah.
Hello, my name is Narissa Williams-Scott, independent producer at That Child Got Talent Entertainment. I have a question in regards to the flip side of immigration, not so much getting the artists into the country, but getting our artists out of the country. We're running into significant issues with embassy issues, trying to find the right path to get these artists into these various countries. And I was just wondering if you have knowledge of resources or something that we can do and things of that nature.
It depends a little bit on what country they're going to, but this, on the topic of shameless plugs, there's an organization in Brussels called On the Move, and if you Google On the Move, arts, mobility, something like that, you will find them, and it's a coalition of arts organizations around the world that deal with this type of topic for their countries. So if you're sending an artist to Portugal and you're trying to figure out how do the taxes work in Portugal, how do the visas work, there is an On the Move member based in Portugal that website will direct you to, and they will provide pro bono support. Tamizdat is the U.S. member of On the Move. And there's a fair number of them, and if there isn't a member in the country you're concerned with, they probably can link you to somebody who's going to have information about that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Is there a media campaign that is going alongside of the legislative work on Fix the Ticks to try and raise some kind of public awareness of where this legislation is at right now?
Just so the timeline is understood, the bill that was introduced in the Senate got introduced about December 8th, or I think the first week of December. The Ticketing Act made it through some committees around the same time. So there hasn't been a huge media push. There was coverage around the introduction, but in terms from our side in the coalition of really getting the word out, that's starting up because we couldn't really do anything up until we had something that we could talk about. Before this, it was all just hypothetical, but now we actually have bills in place. So the media push is going to be, the next phase of the campaign, if that makes sense.
We did just find out from our colleague at the Future of Music Coalition over this weekend that Consumer Reports is backing the Fix the Ticks bill. And they have, that fact has huge media release. So we're all thinking about how can we use social media to promote the fact that Consumer Reports is backing this. It's a pretty big step when you think that the opposing view is purportedly coming from protecting consumers. So there are opportunities for momentum.
There's definitely opportunities for momentum. The other thing that I'm hearing internally is that some of the consumer groups are getting a little tired of this. So if we just keep on pushing, then hopefully they'll get tired out and tuckered out, and then we'll be able to get this through at the end of the day. But yeah.
You want to add something?
I was going to, then I decided not to.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to give you 3 more minutes to reconsider, which I hope you will. So we're kind of nearing the end of our time here, but I wanted to be sure to mention that we in APAP thought these 2 issues would be helpful to bring forward to you because there's traction at multiple levels, right? So you can engage on topics at the state level. You can tell your story to a policy leader. You can write, it could take you less than 10 minutes to write a comment in the Federal Register. There are any number of action items that you can do. You can let your association know when you're running into a policy problem, right? So you definitely have very many things you could do today, but these are just 2 topics, and the actual policy landscape is vast. So, it was mentioned, I think, at the top that we're at a real repetition of a problem with the federal budget, which will just go on and on. Your elected officials do still need to hear from you about how important our nation's cultural agencies are. They need to hear from you about the fact that we value arts education and we think it should be available to every single child in this country. It's part of a complete education, right? If you work in the nonprofit space, if you're affiliated with a nonprofit venue, you've got to be talking to your policy leaders about increasing incentives for charitable giving because they're taking up tax reform stuff right now. I guarantee you that there is an issue that you are experiencing that is somehow moving on the policy front. Congress is thinking about reauthorizing the programs that support the U.S. workforce. We have something to say about that when it comes to the arts. And there are dire threats to creative expression that are happening in communities every single day by way of anti-trans, anti-drag policies that are moving, again, fast at the state level. So I know these are issues we all care about. If the 2 topics you heard about today don't exactly resonate with you, the strategies we've been discussing are the same across these policy issues. And I know APAP will keep reaching out to you with the latest information about how you can take action in this space. And I know the 3 of us are very happy to be an ongoing resource to you as well.
And Heather, I just want to chime in. Do not only focus at the federal level. It is really, really important that everyone knows that you can affect state politics. I hadn't done any work along these lines up until a couple years ago, and myself and a few other ragtag musicians got New York musicians access to about $250 million of small business, and that was just talking to elected officials across New York. It really seems very daunting, but once you start getting in there, once you start doing the work, it is a lot more, you have a lot more potential than you think you do. And so don't only focus on the federal, you can affect state policies a lot more than you think.
All right, one last
Yeah.
comment from the floor.
Sure. I'm Jenny from APAP, and I've been working with these lovely people. I wanted just because it's something I think is a piece that's really confusing for people around Fix the Ticks, because you ended with talking about the consumer groups are getting tired. There's this wordplay. There's this kind of smoke and mirrors happening with consumer groups. And I wanted you to explain a little bit more, because I think if people are not kind of necessarily knowing the whole backstory, it might sound very strange that Consumer Reports is supporting us, but consumer groups maybe aren't. Or so I was wondering if you could kind of share a little bit, and I know we're at the end, but just illuminate a little bit around what that whole the mystique of the consumer groups situation is.
I'll do my best in about 2 minutes. There are various consumer groups or consumer advocates. Some are straight AstroTurf organizations. An AstroTurf organization is essentially someone that is set up to make it look like it is, positive and trying to affect change in a way that makes sense for consumers in this group. But in fact, they have a very financial goal and they're backed by someone else. And so they're advocating on behalf of something that is not going to benefit the people they're trying to represent. And then there are other groups in this fight that are just being paid and taking money by secondary ticket groups. I think the NCL is one example that, in their financial reports over the past 5 or 6 years, StubHub and SeatGeek have, donated to their organization. So it's just straight Washington, not very pleasant stuff where people are taking money and being paid on behalf of these groups to make sure policies are written and advocated for. So yes, it does not make sense that a consumer group would say people should pay more money on the secondary market. I agree, but that's what's happening right now. And so it's not pretty, and that's why they say don't see how the sausage is getting made, but that's the reality. Is there more to really? I think that's about it, yeah.
So, are you feeling
No.
bold? Are
No,
you going to say the thing
no,
now?
it wasn't. It
You
wasn't
leaned
relevant.
forward like
it was
you
this
were
moment where
almost-
you're like, I have some. No, I really don't need to say that.
I think
It's
you got to
just-
say
was
it
just-
now.
No, it's okay.
All
It's really
right,
not.
okay.
It's a tangent.
Well, then I'll say one last thing. Because elected officials are focused on being reelected, they are spending more time outside of Washington in the next several months than ever before. Like they just aren't, they're barely showing up in DC to get a budget maybe done, right? They are going to be home. They are going to be campaigning. This is your time. You don't necessarily have to fly all the way to DC to get face-to-face with your elected officials. On our website, AmericanOrchestras.org, we have something called the Calendar of Opportunities, where we just list all of the recess dates that they go home. If you are putting on a production during one of those dates, invite your elected official to come see it, or even their staff. Their staff are the ones who are actually writing these bills, right? So consider a moment to engage your policy leaders in seeing the work you're doing live and in person. There is no better advocacy than them actually experiencing the art for themselves, the art making for themselves. So I think that can be your first thing to do when you get home is connect with your officials when they're back home over the next several months, and you'll be able to fix all of this stuff for us. Thank you.
Thanks.